So this is my B283 100 challenge presentation. I started a company called Easy Software, and I'm going to tell you a little more about it in these next slides. So Easy Software came out when I was training some users about the use of a maintenance program so that my family developed. But I started to realize that many of the users had little knowledge on computer use. So from that I could start to realize that companies acquire software but they do not pay the technical support in order to understand the software they bought, or it's hard for people to understand based on the user manual. I realized that this could help. I realized that if I make this more easier by training with easy training, this could help companies reduce costs on training directly from external companies and also help to modernize their companies. This represents a better productivity taking advantage of new technologies that will keep track on companies' various activities. So that is the main idea. I'm going to tell you how I did apply all these ideas. When I started the company, I did not need too much, but I knew that it was 100% necessary to search for companies which were in process of acquiring software to improve their processing information on what the companies would do. I even found a company in which I suggested the uses of certain software that could help them keep track of every expenses that the company was making. I was able to work with 3 companies in which I knew their personnel had difficult times in order to understand the software they're trying to use. Even companies had software which included a maintenance program bought 5 years ago and they were not using it. I was able to see in which aspects the company workers were lacking and how they could improve. I was allowed to start with the survey I made, showing managers and head of each company's areas how were their workers using the software they already had, including the manage of a computer. I was able to show them a training plan which provides assistance within the weeks they receive the training. I also created a test that helped me to see in which areas the personnel being trained was having more difficulties. I also recommend on which software they could use. For example, one of the companies was having problems keeping track of numbers because they were using Excel sheets. Instead, I told them to hire a programmer to help them doing Excel macros, which will help them filter the information they need. After the training, a follow-up came, more like a polish those things that were hard to work with, trying to answer questions and launch them into the software usage. A final evaluation was presented to the head areas of the company. The 3 companies started to show a more organized areas in which data started to show up in the software, having real data on mostly the expenses and tracking on what the people were doing, even the time reaction of the users. So here's a breakdown of the on the cost and profits. Transportation was my only cost. The hardest part was trying to understand the software they were using and making an elaborate plan on the things I should train. The training plan and program will have a final cost to the company of $60 with a whole week of training, and the other remaining days will be for the follow-up and final evaluations, meaning that the entire program will requires 2 weeks. Having less costs and more incomes, I did my computation and the gross profits were about $120, having a profit margin of 67%. So my final lesson on this amazing project is that the planning and organization of the projects includes this type of decision making for the company. This is the main key, learning all the process from the surveys to the final evaluation of my own work. Having some difficulties in the middle, but correct them as I embrace to the journey of creating this company. Something I would recommend is always keeping track of what you're doing, because if you do not know what plans you made or the things you made, you could have some problems trying to remember it. We are not robots, but requires mostly patience and perseverance. Because if you give up, you will be able to do a good job, and companies will not take you seriously. Meaning that creating a company, a small business, requires a lot of faith from myself, because this is what you actually trying to do. This is what actually you are visualizing. So thank you for having your attention.